Okay, I'm going to call the public session to order at 7:01. If we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, just a reminder to everyone, please use your microphone when you speak so that you could be heard on video. So we'll move into possible action matters emanating from executive session, which we have none, which brings us to public comment. If any member of the public would like to offer public comment, please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Thank you. If any other member of the public would like to offer comment, please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. And one last call for public comment. Seeing none, we will move into the superintendent's report, and I will turn it over to Superintendent Montini.
That me? Excellent. Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, members of the audience. I have a brief update. I'll tell a quick little story about our return through some photos that we took. Now, just before I begin, unfortunately, our amazing communication specialist, Lorraine, was unable to join us. So the quality of the last couple of years of the photos was a lot better than what I'm going to share with you today, which were mostly in between welcoming and smiles and helping kids get where they belong. We were snapping some with our phones, which I will start by saying we had a really, really good opening of school. You could feel the positive energy, eagerness, enthusiasm, hope. First, I'll say the weather cooperated. The last 2 years it rained. This was a warm but pleasant day, where, as you can see, we had lots of families bringing their kids, walking their kids to school. So the theme of the days leading up to the opening of school was all about community, connectedness, sense of belonging, working together to achieve our hopes and our dreams. And partnering, of course, with all of the people that make this community amazing. So it was just great to see so many families walking their kids to school, giving hugs goodbye, some with tears in their eyes, some K for the first time. Remember what it was like when you sent your kindergartner off to school for the first time. And if you were like me, you followed the bus, but that's another story. So it really was a good day. And we had other students who were welcomed by staff warmly as they got off the bus, sisters walking to school together. And as you could see, one big brother helping a little brother with amazing matching outfits on the first day of school. Priceless. And so I'll start to the right where we have kids that were really happy to just reconnect with their friends and their peers. Hugs and embraces. And perhaps on the left, my favorite picture, I fumbled really quickly for my phone out of my jacket. We have two young students that got off the bus at Maple Hill, totally pure, just looked over at each other, grabbed each other's hands, and they walked all the way to their class hand in hand like that. I have like 15 pictures on my phone because I was like, oh, look, this is the best picture ever. Because that's what we're all about. We're all about doing things together, supporting each other. And you know what? When you get off the bus on the first day of school, if you need a friend, I got you. I'm going to grab your hand and we're going to do this. So it was wonderful. And then we had some teachers who left not left notes, but there were morning messages, notes on whiteboards, notes on chart papers when students walked in. On this team, you will be listened to, cared for, supported, and loved. The work will not always be easy right away. However, the more you practice, the easier it will be. I will always be here to cheer you on. You are just right for this class, I promise. Love, Mrs. Pompey. Hello, awesome students. Welcome to the 6th grade red team. In this class, I want you to know that you are cared for, supported, safe, work hard, and good things will happen. Best, Mr. Singley. 2 examples of all of the work, the love, the care, the planning that takes place in the summer so that we can open with wide arms our amazing students and we can help them achieve everything that they wish to achieve and beyond. And then, of course, what is more priceless than preschoolers writing down what they, of course, want to achieve or learn about, from monkeys to shapes to writing to reading. Huge smiles abound. And that, again, priceless. And so beyond that, we had some schools that were welcomed with signs out front where kids got to take pictures. If you look really closely, you might see a very old child that was posing there because I arrived there much later than arrival as we were touring all of the schools. And then others were ready to embrace and engage in circles and community building activities in classes. You can see that here. And Mrs. Romano, who happens to be in the audience, new principal, joined a circle at Maple Hill. You can see on the left, see? We have 2 students, really cool, had first day of school t-shirts on, special, all the way on the right. Sounds futuristic, but this young man is in the class of 2034. And he had a customized t-shirt for with his teacher's name, Mrs. Burns, on it. But everywhere you went, you felt warmth and positive energy. You may say, where are all the pictures of the high schoolers and middle schoolers? I'm going to give you a really quick answer to that. One, I spent all of my time in the freshman hallway helping wide-eyed freshmen find their classes, so there was no time. We went from one end to the hallway to the other, finding classes. It was really great. But the high school kids, they engage with you, have a conversation. It's lovely. Didn't take pictures of the middle school kids because they're just like this and they're all business, it's that age level. So most of our photos were of some of our younger folks, not to say that we didn't welcome back our older students as well. And we had more circles in different schools, different approaches, but really focusing on the strength of the community, getting to know each other, working together, being an attentive listener, being an active listener, eye contact, knowing each other. And then in the upper right, cross street continuing with their outside dining under the pretty tree that they have out there in front. So it was a really good start to what is going to be a really good year. Any questions in regards to the opening? Great. Then I will move right along to a presentation, and I'm calling this the summary of the 21-22 state assessment data, even though there's 31 slides in here. And but I'm gonna treat it like a summary. So the thing with data is you can always dive deeper. So this is what I'm calling a summary. So I had hoped that we would have an opportunity to have the state assessment results released a little earlier so that we could do a workshop in the summer, but they were released right along the same time or the week before publicly. They were released prior to start of school. So in terms of timing, here we are. So I'm going to start and read. That's a lot of words for a presentation, I understand, but it's from the Connecticut State Department of Education's Performance Office. And I think that it characterizes what we're seeing across the state, which of course is what we're seeing here in Naugatuck as well, and then nationally as well. So results from the 21-22 summative assessments show that there are some signs of learning acceleration and recovery. However, overall student achievement still lags pre-pandemic levels. Achievement in 21-22 is still below the three most recent pandemic years. It's true for students in the high needs group, and that's important to know because we'll look at some data tonight through that lens. That includes English learners, students with disabilities, and/or students from low-income families, and those without high needs, thus illustrating the widespread impact of the pandemic on student achievement. The performance index changes translate to declines in student proficiency of around 6 to 8 percentage points in English language arts and mathematics, and around 4 percentage points in science. And that's from the Csde's Performance Office newsletter. So what you have here, which is essentially a cover page or a cover slide for the various assessments that go into the state assessments that we use to monitor and evaluate our progress. So what we have is 2018 on the left, Connecticut for ELA, math, science, Naugatuck for ELA, math, science, and then the average of the alliance districts as another barometer to the right. So when you take a look, that Connecticut or Naugatuck has in 2018 was slightly below the state average in ELA and in math, a little more in science, but higher than Alliance. And what we have after the 21-22 scores came out, we have lower performance index, a decrease of 6, 6.9, and about 1, 1.5 for science. Science really remained relatively flat, but we still have, well, we're below Connecticut average, slightly higher than the Alliance averages in terms of our performance index scores. And we knew, given the change in learning models and everything that we had overcome and that we had accomplished over the last couple of years, that our 21-22 would be establishing new baseline scores. We'd be writing goals, we'd be owning this data, and we would be creating plans for growth and continuous improvement in all that we do. That's what we do. That's why we exist. So, but we're not going to forget that we have our pre-pandemic scores that we're trying to surpass, right? So we have a new baseline, but we still have our other scores, and we're keeping our eyes on those as well, because we're going to get back there, and then we're going to continue on our trend of improvement, and we're going to go beyond those. That will take time. Again, lots of numbers. I don't mean, but I do want to illustrate a point here. So what I did on this slide for the performance index scores is we're taking a look at it by grade level. So you have 18, 19 on the left, 21, 22 in the middle, and then the change. So what you'll see in the change column is right away, and now we're not comparing the same students to the same students. So these third graders compared with third graders in 18, 19. But of course, their experiences were quite different given the state of the world. So you saw, I'm going to use the word regression in scores, not in students, from the current third grade, big numbers, right? Bigger numbers, 8, 13, 6, 9, impactful in the lower grades. Then you get into the intermediates, not as much regression in ELA, but a little more in math. Middle school, a little more in ELA, not as much in math. And the high school remained relatively flat. But as you know, the high school data points are among, at least in terms of math, our lowest, and we are continuing to work on those as well. We'll get to that when we talk a little bit about, in a few minutes, about SATs. So when we look at our data, we look at students, we look at all students, we look by school, we look by grade level, we look to see if there's patterns across students by race or ethnicity. Same columns here where we're looking at the change. And what you'll notice in excuse me, but what you'll notice in terms of in the center column for the performance index is that white students continue to outperform students of color, not significantly, but that continues. And then when you take a look at the change, there was little variation in change, but less regression in terms of scores with Black and African American students. Not as much variation, and it's almost like the impact was consistent, across students, and not tons of variation there. We also look, when we're looking at scores, because this is all about the extent to which we can get to know our learners, to be able to provide for them, to be able to help them improve across a continuum. So we take a look at English learners and non-English learners. And all of this is from the Connecticut Accountability Index, right? Our kind of our school report cards. So no surprise that our students who are not English learners outperform our English learners. And there is a little variation in terms of the change over time, but not a lot. And then we look at males and females. And I just want to point out, when we're looking at the performance index is all students who take the assessment for that subject area. The ultimate target, it's from 0 to 100. The ultimate target in Connecticut is 75. So if you remember, when I go back, Connecticut established these targets. So pre-pandemic, Connecticut has targets of 75. The state average is below that target of 75. I share that with you because previously folks on the board had made comments such as, you've not made one target, you've missed targets. Not sure if these were the targets that were being referred to, but we're always trying to get to that 75 target. Connecticut established that ultimate target for the performance index of 75. So we also look at high needs and not high needs. And if you remember at the beginning, a high need is a student with disability, student from who's socioeconomically impacted, or a English language learner. So if you're in that category versus someone who does not, you'll notice that if you're not high needs, you're outperforming those with high needs. And you'll notice that there was really no variance in regards to the regression. It was pretty consistent. So taking a few minutes in regards to the context to sort of tell you what you already know. You turn on the news, you see that nationally scores have been lower. Nationally, they're reporting that some of the assessments are from national assessments such as NAEP, that some of the scores are 2 decades below. And now we're going to take a look at the various assessments that feed into that are grade level specific, such as Smarter Balanced. So we have Smarter Balanced, we have the Ngss assessment, we have Lost Links, we have the SAT. All of these are included in that suite of state assessments. So what I did here is we talked with the performance, or I shared with you in regards to the performance index around the impact and the loss. We'll have a cover sheet that will compare our scores like this to 18-19, and then we'll break down across groups the baseline data from 2021. So you see in regards to Smarter Balance, the Smarter Balanced assessment, we were really close to the state average in ELA in 18-19. We were a little higher in math. We now are below in the state average in both, and higher than the Alliance average currently in regards to that baseline. This assessment is administered to all students in grades 3 through 8. And now we'll take a look at some of the Smarter Balanced assessment achievement results. This refers to the percentage of students in each grade level, in this case, that are meeting or exceeding the standard. And you'll see that the results by grade level across grades 3 through 8. You'll also see results by school, all but the high school and the preschool who don't administer the assessment. We'll see in regards to the data where females outperform males in ELA on the Smarter Balanced Assessment by about 9 points, and males in math slightly, by really a point. But that's relatively even. And then all of these tests essentially feed into that performance index that I shared at the beginning. So you'll see that this is an example of the white students outperforming students of color in regards to proficiency on the Smarter Balanced Assessment. This is what we refer to when we talk about an achievement gap. Here you'll see, again, this is all going to be really similar to those introductory slides when we were talking about the performance indices. The students without high needs are outperforming those with high needs. And I shared this data with you because, sorry, I'm getting a little aggressive with the clicker here. I shared this data with you. This is how the data is broken down to us. Also, well, we broke this down, but when we receive our accountability report and we receive our scores, these are all of the groups that they look at and trends that we report on. So now you have achievement for Smarter Balanced, and now you have growth. And the way that we measure growth in regards to the Smarter Balanced Assessment is through the average percent of target achieved. And basically, it just takes up all of the growth and what that average is collectively, and then how much of that target you achieved. So it'd be great if we were over 100% and we'd be aggressively closing gaps. Closer you are to 100, closer you are to meet what are ambitious and aggressive targets that were set by the state. And just as a backdrop to this, the state had to develop a 10-year plan to get to 100. So beginning with the end in mind, you subtract from 100 where you are and divide that up incrementally, and you get sort of these, we call them Essa Targets. It's all a part of the Essa grant. So in some ways, they're ambitious yet attainable, and sometimes they're a little more ambitious, than attainable. But our focus is, where are we now? What have we learned from these assessments? What can we do to provide support, increase learning, and provide students with the opportunities to continuously improve? So in regards to growth, we have the scores as they compare to Connecticut and the Alliance. Our average percent of target achieve dipped in terms of ELA, where it's the first, and I have only indicators, I believe, where we're below the Alliance average by a few points in both ELA and in math. So you'll see that we have bright spots. There's bright spots in all data, right? Our science scores are really, we didn't regress nearly at all. We stayed flat, even though the state dropped about 4. You'll notice that certain grade levels in certain subjects, we see grade 4 math, almost an 80% average percent of growth achieved. That's a strong point. You'll see by school, a lot of growth in the elementaries. So some of our students who might not have had the experiences are growing fast. And if we continue to grow fast, the achievement levels and the meeting or exceeding the performance levels, we're going to close that if they continue to grow at those rates. So 85%, you can read, but especially in our lower grades. When we compare growth in regards to males and females, we see that our females had a larger average percent of target achieved than did males in both subjects. That's grades 3 through 8. When we take a look at student growth, again, average percent of target achieved across by race and ethnicity, you'll see that there was really not a lot of variation, although students of color slightly outperformed students in terms of growth, white students. Now, if we were to aggressively close gaps, we would want these numbers to be higher. Yeah. In terms of high needs and not high needs, not high needs had experienced a larger average percent of target achieved, outperformed, but minimally, 4 and 5 or 6 percentage points there. And now and I'm going fast because there's be plenty of opportunity if we want separate meetings, workshops, et cetera, to dive in more. Some of this will be incorporated later when you hear from schools. Not today, later in the year. So in regards to the SAT, MPS was right in line with the Alliance, below the state average in regards to ELA. Math, it's a data point that we've been talking about for years. We're redoing curriculum, et cetera. We were far below the state average in math SAT and below Alliance in 18-19. That trend continued, right? So the trend continued. We're higher in Alliance and ELA, lower than Alliance in math, lower than the state average in both in the SAT. Administered, this is school day SAT, administered to 11th graders. When we look at groups and trends, this is a little different. So we have females, males outperformed females in ELA, and females outperformed males in math. Slightly, yep. So the reverse of what we saw in grades 3 through 8. When we look at, so now what you'll have, what we had in the lower grades in terms of white students outperforming students of color, there was a smaller gap. At the high school here, you'll see the 60 in regards to ELA it's larger at when we look at our SAT scores. One thing I'll also say, and I put it in, put the suppression guidelines in the document. If you don't see a score there, that means that there is either not enough data or not enough students for it to be either one, statistically relevant, right? You don't want to have 100% up there of let me say island Native Hawaiians or Island Pacific if 100% is one student, right? That would statistically, that wouldn't be valid. You also cannot put the data is suppressed if it could lead to the identification of students or someone figuring out who those students are. So that data is not released. Our schools have student level data, that's where it's really important. But if we had, let's say 3 students who are Asian, and I put this here, then our high school students at the high school could theoretically go figure out who they are. And I chose small numbers for ease of illustration. But that data, the state is the one, and I put the suppression guidelines right in board docs if you'd like to take a look. But really, it's related to FERPA and confidentiality. If it's not there, or if it could be identifiable information, it's suppressed. When we take a look at high needs, not high needs, again, continued trend, outperform those high needs. So we have 2 more assessments to share with you. One is the NGSS, Next Generation Science Standards. It's the science assessment. It's administered to students in grades 5, grades 8, and grade 11. So science was a bright spot at the beginning that I shared with you. We were in 2018-19, we were higher than Alliance, which is a theme other than for the average percent of target achieved, and lower than the Connecticut average. That still holds true, slightly higher than Alliance, lower than the Connecticut average. Mind you, I share this with you because these are our districts of comparison. We are an Alliance group because they're comparable, right? They are in you've heard things in the past about DERGs and education reference groups, and we want to be atop the Alliance group and better than the state average. And then once we get there, when we get there, we're going to make plans to get even better, right? Until we continuously improve our programming to help all students be the vision of the graduate and have the experiences that they need and that they deserve. So that's why we included Alliance. When we take a look at the NGS assessments across grades, highest in 5, then 8, then 11. So a downward trend there. We have, again, those are downward trend just in terms of those students, right? It wasn't those students compared to themselves, like they lost ground on themselves. When we take a look across schools, there are some bright spots. Females outperformed males on the NGSS. There's some smiles in the audience, okay. And here we have the data suppressed, but we do have, with no data labels, but I missed that. Similar to the performance index, students outperforming in this category with not suppressed Hispanic students or Latinos of any race, which are our two biggest groups, by the way. About 45% of our students are now white. Last year it was 50-50. Or no, 2 years ago, 50-50. The students who took the assessment, I should say, 40 assessments, so most grades, but not all, 45% white, 30-something were Hispanic. So those are our two largest groups, which is likely why we don't have others represented here, especially in NGSS that only looks at 3 grade levels. Again, high needs, not high needs. It's a similar trend. And the last assessment is the lost links. And this is it's administered to EL students who qualify based on their level of English proficiency. It's administered K-12. Do we do pre-K? No, K-12. K-12. And you'll notice that we are, in 1920, we were a little higher. We now are right in line with the Connecticut average, slightly below Alliance in terms of the oral component of that. And in terms of literacy, we are a little higher than the state and a little lower than Alliance. And overall in line with the state and a little lower than Alliance. Lost links also is an assessment that has a growth component, average percent of target achieved. Our average percent of target achieved is relatively in line, but lower than both in terms of L's, the Alliance and the state average. So the last 2 years in our budget process and in our curriculum development process, we increased our staffing and we are implementing a brand new L program. So we've been working towards this and are prepared for this. So you'll notice when we bring you the Alliance grant, when we talked, if you remember last year, we hired a few new teachers and developed a new program. So we are poised to improve proficiency for our multilingual learners as well. So I know that was a lot, 30 slides, 31 if you count questions. I'm happy to answer questions now or revisit it another time if we want to. One thing I will say is, it looks like you're going to ask a question, Mrs. Grant, is our schools do the same thing and they drill down even further. Who are the students in front of them? What do we need to do? How do we need to program? What do we need to provide them with so that we will improve our scores? Sorry.
Well, actually, you did answer it. I was going to say that when the schools do their presentations, they're going to help us to understand or present their plans for filling some of these holes or gaps in the achievement. And we should be very interested and pay close attention to the high school for the 11th grade. That seems to be when things kind of stop and it's almost like they're going backwards especially for the students of color and the Hispanic students. So we need to know why is that happening and what's going to be done or what they're doing to improve.
Yes, agreed. We share the data with you to let you know that we're looking at it this way because we are asking those questions.
Yep.
Hi, what can we learn? How? What can we learn from it, et cetera.
Yeah.
And yes, our schools, when they present to you, I just want to structure it in a way where you're not getting 5 of the same elementary presentations, but they will share with you plans for improvement and components of the strategic plan.
Will they also have target dates or is that too much to ask?
Target dates for
For improvement, seeing improvement.
well, the hard
It's
part,
kind of hard, I know.
when you're talking about state assessments, But we do administer some other assessments locally that are beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year, which we can report out to you, our local assessments in the middle of the year
Right.
in the winter.
Yeah.
We're talking year to year in regards to these.
Exactly.
And we're also talking about not having the previous year scores for these students,
Mhm.
right? So there was one grade that was fifth grade math.
Mhm.
And I was thinking to myself, why is that fifth grade math lower than some of those other grade levels? And normally I'd be able to go back and I'd be able to look, how did they do as fourth graders? What did they do in third grade? And so from a state assessment to state assessment, I could look at other local measures, which is what we're doing and our schools are doing. But we don't have that other states, those state data available. Or if we do, it's really not supposed to be used for comp purposes because the world was different last year. Yeah, so I agree with you.
Yeah, we've got a
important.
long haul.
We do.
Yeah.
We have a long haul. This is there's a sense of urgency around all of this.
Mhm.
While I couched this, right, in terms of this is the world in which we live and there's the pandemic, those certainly are not excuses. It's acknowledging where we exist.
Mhm.
It's owning this data and owning the plans and the mindset and the effort and the persistence of what we have to do and what we need to do, the moral imperative, what we need to do to help kids achieve.
Yeah, there are quite a few articles out now about what's been lost for the kids. So there are a lot of boards doing the same thing that you're doing, we're doing, trying to make a plan.
Okay. So we are going to, so we shared with you last year a multi-year strategic plan on the heels of, well, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Cooney, who will share with you some updates in regards to that plan.
So Ethel, because of your question, I'm going to skip to the data, and I was going to save that for the end. And we're not going to go deeply into the data, but as you know, our strategic framework, our strategic plan is a multi-year plan, and it gets revised every year based on data points and shifts that we need to make to address some of our needs. And so the strategic framework is here for you. You'll notice that there are still 4 priorities with action steps. The first being academic excellence, the second being climate and culture, the third being systems for student success, and then the fourth being talent development. We've added new goals around the data, much of which was just presented to you by Superintendent Montini. We still don't have the final graduation rate that hasn't been released from the state yet, so that's missing here. But you'll notice that we have some district-wide assessments listed here that were not covered because Mr. Montini was going over statewide assessments. And so you see we have some diagnostic assessments such as iReady, math, and reading. And we did share with you beginning of the year and end of the year goals because the schools will have in their plans where they're monitoring 3 times a year, progress monitoring, ELA, and math, so that they have that data, Ethel, and would be able to share that. So you'll see that in the data in our strategic plan. And then you also will see in the climate and culture goals that we have included our DESA data, which is the social emotional data. That assessment looks at social awareness, self-management, relationship skills, and goal-directed behaviors. And then we've included our stakeholder survey data around specifically for us focused on the student surveys climate construct and the teachers climate construct and the communication construct for the teachers surveys. At the schools in their plans, you'll see that they dug a little deeper into each of those constructs and have more specific data related to each of the buildings. In terms of our updates, I highlighted for you some changes in each of those priority areas. And so under academic excellence, I wanted to highlight some focused areas this year based on our data. We have a newly designed phonics and phonemic awareness curriculum for grades K through 3. We have been working on revising our practices and protocols in writing. Much of this work is heavily grounded in Lucy Calkins and Sarah Vallo's work. Our plan is focused more specifically on the math rollout for illustrative math in grades K5, 8, 9, and in Algebra 1. In science, we're shifting to the Open SciEd curriculum in grades 6, 7, and 8. And we are currently implementing a new individual education plan document and the Connecticut Special Education Data System. In our priority 2, which is culture and climate, all of our schools have created comprehensive school-based climate plans. In those plans, they highlight a fidelity of implementation of responsive classroom in our grades pre-K through 8 and restorative practices in grades pre-K through 12. They also highlight regular meetings for their school climate teams where they're going to be analyzing attendance, discipline, and referral data and using that information to inform next steps in the buildings. And we also have, as you know, an updated and we'll maintain our new webpage as a communication tool with our families. In priority 3, which is our systems for success, I wanted to feature some updates with our security grant rollout this year. We're rolling out a Raptor security software system, which is a system that is going to allow us to monitor visitors and any person entering our buildings. It runs IDs through their system and will immediately identify if they were a sex offender, for example, and then it prints out visitor badges that have their picture on them, so directly from their license. It also directly communicates with the Naugatuck Police Department when we have codes and reduces time in terms of the response rate because of that direct communication, and has a geo-tracking ability where the person who actually does make the call can be tracked by the police department, potentially, if we set it up that way, which would also eliminate time for responses if we had an emergency in one of our buildings. We're also implementing the Navigate 360 platform. We have trained our staff with Alice and our Alice plan, which is our active shooter plan, but this platform allows us to house that training electronically and provide it and document and make sure that we're ensuring that every single staff member receives that training. We also have improved efficiency tools such as a Time Clock Plus upgrade, and we are rolling out Enrollment Express as part of a new enrollment system where parents will fill out all of the forms electronically, and then they go through an approval process and directly get uploaded right into PowerSchool. And for priority 4, which is our talent development and staff, some new updates. We'll be working to develop and implement a new employee handbook and creating a mandatory training platform where we would be able to document and staff would be able to easily access mandatory trainings such as our DCF sexual harassment and ALICE trainings.
And implement a system of exit interviews.
And we'll be adding a new bullet for implementing a system for exit interviews. Any questions for that?
For the student enrollment, you said it'll be electronically. So suppose someone doesn't have a computer or come on in.
They can come here,
Okay.
yes, and you can also use your telephone. So it's compatible with telephones, which
Great.
the majority of them have, but of course, they can still come here. They will still come for an appointment because they have to bring some mandatory documents. But of course, and we are also, right now, have translated all the documents in Spanish and Portuguese, and we'll continue to build that so that they'll have access in their native language. Those two languages are mostly spoken by our families in Naugatuck.
Very good. Thanks.
Sure.
Great. Thank you guys very much. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move into our monthly reports. First, we have our student representatives report, and Josephine and Ruby.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say that I'm really happy to be back in school and to see all of you guys. And I just wanted to reintroduce Ruby Monroe, who I'm not sure if you guys remember, but she is our new junior student representative. So super excited to have her here. And we just have a couple of things for you this evening, just because we have just returned to school. So the first one is exactly that NPS students have returned to school. And at the high school, we've been introduced to our new teachers and classes, and we've been spending time in our advisory periods reviewing the school charter and safety procedures.
Naugatuck High School sports teams have also come back to prepare for their fall seasons. Football, soccer, swim, and cross country will be beginning and have begun their seasons in the upcoming days.
And one thing we're super excited about is a partnership that we've made with the Naugatuck High School journalism classes. So starting in October, members of the journalism team, and there's actually going to be 3 boys. Their names are Matthew Davey, Dayton Beck, and Jalen Kinney Bethia. So they will be coming in. They'll be switching off for meetings and then publishing articles through the journalism website so that students can be more involved and engaged with the board processes. So we're excited for that.
And finally, the student liaisons will be meeting with their respective student representatives from the middle and intermediate schools, and we're excited to share reports from the younger students in the district at future meetings.
Great, thank you guys very much. So that brings us to our facility use report. Any questions on the facility use report? Seeing none, the human resource report. Any questions on the human resource report? Seeing none, that brings us to our enrollment report. Any questions on our enrollment report?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I may, at our last meeting, Superintendent Montini had us look closely at the grade 4 class sizes at Hopbrook School. I want to draw your attention to those class sizes as well. For this month, I noted in my summary that we will be recommending adding a teacher to address that class size. What's not represented in that report are 2 students that are currently registering and in the registration process for grade 4 at Hopbrook School that will be in that report next month. So that will be increasing the class sizes to 26, 27, 27, 27, 27, 27, 28. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. That brings us to the fire drill report. Any questions on the fire drill report? Seeing none, that brings us to old business. And our first item on old business is the implementation of a purchasing card program.
Great. So our last meeting, we were talking about P cards, and I think that there was some talk around the way that the motion was written, How do we know if we are going to like it? What's the extent to which we are going to implement it? So Bernice worked hard. She wrote you a memo and she developed some procedures. We are asking the board for a motion to allow the business manager to implement a P card program with the Bank of Montreal that's really narrowly focused. Our goal is to not use this widespread. It's really to use when places don't accept POs. So if you, in Bernice's memo, and Bernice, if the board has any questions, I know you'll be happy to address those. It really, the scope is that Bernice and myself are the two people that are going to use them. We're not giving pre-populated P cards out, at least right now, in terms of our procedures. This is it. If the procedures change after a year and we implement this program, we'll come back to you with modified procedures. But essentially, it's to use when can't do PO, but we need some kind of a service, and we don't have a credit card. Some districts have credit cards. Lots of districts have P cards. The town uses P cards. The town uses P cards much more broadly than we do. We're going to continue with our tight controls in Munis, our tight purchasing controls, but we need to have this so that sometimes when we really need something, we're not ripping our own credit cards and then getting reimbursed later. It's just a cleaner way of doing it. So with that, I'm going to, Mr. Chair, turn it back over to you, either for the motion and or discussion, and Bernice is certainly here to answer questions if need be.
Okay. So we could have discussion. Could I have a motion to allow the business manager to implement a purchasing card program with the Bank of Montreal?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion by Mr. Scully. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second by Ms. Makowski. Any discussion?
From what I understand, a lot of the questions that we asked were answered except for the one that still bugs me, but we'll live with it, that we got to approve it before we get it. The card.
Well,
We'll take your approval. We'll develop the program, send it to them, and then we can bring it back to you before using it and have it established so that essentially it's really a formality or a procedure.
No, it sounds good.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? That motion passes. That brings us to BOE Policy 3320, Purchasing Procedures.
Mr. Chair, may I begin?
Yes.
So last meeting, so we're in old business. There were comments made around the purchasing procedure, and it essentially was voted down or tabled quickly. So what we did is, first, I wanted an opportunity to tell you that the policy, the purchasing policy is written by our attorneys in line with the law. Updates that were provided were really to update and align with federal regulations around the bidding process. Some of the questions that were asked then really were not about the policy, were about procedures. So when we left the meeting, Bernice developed the procedures. We already had the procedures. We have really tight purchasing procedures in Munis with multiple levels of approval. There was, I don't know if it was an implication that we needed tighter procedures, but I think we were talking policy and someone was talking procedures. So what we did was we went and we got the town's purchasing policy and procedures, and we found that theirs are, well, really similar to ours. They have a policy and then there's procedures. So we typed up the procedures so you know that procedures are in fact in place. They have to be in place. And they're very tight. If anything, we are as we're as aligned to the town procedures, very, very similar. So I'm bringing back the policy to you unchanged because the policy is in line with the law written by our attorneys. And I shared with you what I think was the question of the day, which are, well, what are some of your more specific procedures that guide you? And with that, Mr. Chair, thank you. I'll turn it over, and Bernice is here if there's any questions.
Thank you. So then could I have a motion to approve BOE policy 3320, purchasing procedures as proposed?
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Grant. Do we have a second? And a second by Ms. Makowski. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? That motion passes. That brings us to the Child Care Shared Services Agreement with the YMCA.
I could start again. We're going to ask for a motion to approve the Child Care Shared Services Agreement between the Naugatuck YMCA and Naugatuck Public Schools. As you know, I believe it was the August meeting, though time is a blur. We brought and you offered a vote of support publicly in regards to pursuing the program. We got together. They've been working on getting the appropriate licensure, and we developed and negotiated this agreement. And legal has approved this as well. So we're really all set. It's in line with the policies that the board has around facility use, et cetera. And it's a really nice opportunity to provide what is somewhat lacking, which is childcare to less than 3. So preschools, certainly, I don't know if there are plenty. We can always use more preschools, but they're more plentiful than our toddler programs. So it'd be great to have that in the building. Part of this contract allows for a openings or slots for some employees here to make it more attractive for teachers to bring kids here. It also will provide opportunities for students to get community service hours, and potentially, if they do a really nice job, employment opportunities after school hours as well. So it really is a nice program. So we're asking for your approval today so they can continue on doing what they need to do to get it operational in the relatively near future.
So then could I have a motion to approve the Child Care Shared Services Agreement between Naugatuck YMCA and Naugatuck Public Schools?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion by Mr. Scully. Do we have a second? And a second by Ms. O'Donnell. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? That motion passes. That brings us to new business, and we have a request for a one-year teacher position.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I stated earlier in the enrollment report and have summarized for you, we are requesting to add a 1.0 grade 4 teacher at Hopbrook. This would be posted as a one-year position. Based on the current enrollment, without the additional 2 students, that would reduce the class size from 27 to 20 students if we added a 4th class to the building.
Thank you. So could I have a motion to approve 1.0 FTE 4th grade teacher at Hopbrook Elementary School? We have a motion by Ms. Grant. Do we have a second? And a second by Ms. O'Donnell. Any discussion?
I'm just wondering, how easy is it going to be to find someone who wants to teach for just 1 year?
It may not be that easy, but not impossible. We were able to fill 2 one-year positions last year.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I just want to say thank you for recognizing our desire and this board's desire for a long time to keep class sizes at a reasonable.
I just had a quick question.
Yeah.
Does that mean that the 5th grade class next year will have a problem as well. All right, there's more staff there for
Right.
that.
So, if that's the case, and during budget time, when we're tracking enrollment throughout the year, we may go to make it permanent at the budget time,
Right.
or the students from Hot Brook are merged with other schools and they're divided amongst
Mm.
eight or seven
Teams.
or
right.
eight fifth grade classes. So the
Right.
impact might not be as much, but we can actually do the math while we're offline and give you an answer as what it would look like with and without.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And any abstentions? That motion passes. That then brings us to the facilities update.
Great. So Michael, if you don't mind heading to the podium and providing an update in regards to our facilities projects.
Working with Mr. Montini, having a more proactive approach to everything that we're doing here. We've got about half of our list completed already in September, and probably another half of that list will be completed in the next few weeks or month. As you can see through the list, one of the biggest items was the playscape repairs that we've done to the schools, Andrew, ECC, et cetera. A lot of tree work and fence work that we've done. And then we want to get ahead of the curve. So starting to plan already for the next year. But we've been working on each one of these items for the school, as you can see in your list. Some of them are larger ticket items, the playscapes especially. Working with the town, for example, with the fire pumps, two of the schools, Maple Hill and Hot Brook. Also, I just want to say number 11, we did a lot of work, if you haven't been there already, up to Maple Hill School. The custodial staff did a fantastic job refinishing the floors there. And working with some other projects like the blacktop work at Maple Hill, working with Lisa, the new principal there, to get that professionally done. And then we have smaller ticket items, which less in money, but equally as important to each school. For example, at Western, we're working to install more improved basketball hoops there for their activities. And as you go through the list, you can see all the items there. One of the items for the high school, the auditorium repairs, I'm working with IT. Actually, I have a meeting tomorrow with Scott Roncardi about that. And then we hit something very large at the high school, a transformer replacement. Working with Eversource to schedule that. We have to cut the high school off from the grid to test that. And then also the very large ticket item there, $67,005, is reinforcing the main doors here at the high school. I'm sorry, that's $26,000 for the main doors of the high school, working to reinforce that. And unanticipated needs, some additional tree work we're having done at different schools.
Thank you, Michael. So green is already completed, yellow's in progress, white would then be next. Our intention would be, Mr. Scully and members of the facilities committee, we would bring this update to you and then we'd bring it to the board. We didn't have one. We had I think, timely communication, so we brought it to the full board. But what we did was we took from the budget all the projects listed, so it's the same exact format, so that we can track the projects over time. And then that last row of the unanticipated needs, we'll be able to let you know what's really what we're coming across and what we're having to fix and address with that money as well. Michael, can you though, we this board has had a few, and myself, we've had some inquiries in regards to the Maple Hill playground. Can you give us a status update in regards to Maple Hill playground? Because I noticed the other schools playscapes have been completed.
Sure. Actually, ProBuilt is out there today to finish that last section with the seesaws. The playground there was quite dated. A lot of code issues that were involved. There's new fall areas. The mulch needed to be increased, but some of the items that were broken aren't made anymore. And so we had to design certain aspects of the playscape to meet certain codes. So Maple Hill really costs a lot more than we thought. In taking apart these items, you can only tell once they're removed, and then you see the damage. But that will be completed in the next, well, part of it tomorrow and then the next week or so. But Maple Hill was really the worst out of all of them.
Michael, did the bridge come in? I know we were waiting on the replacement of the bridge to come in, that part. Did that come in yet?
Not yet. We're trying to figure out how to cost effectively repair that. The bridge itself is one of those U-shaped ones that kids jump up and down. It didn't look that bad until we took it apart and we found that it was really
Unsafe.
unsafe.
Yes.
So there are options to make it entertaining for the kids, yet cost effective, and we're trying to come up with a solution for that.
Do we happen to have an ETA on when it will be fully functional, or do we not yet have that?
Not yet. It's going in sections. So by tomorrow, the seesaw section will be done, and then really
The back section is open?
back section is open. The seesaw will be open tomorrow. The main section is operational. There are a couple of pieces that are going to be replaced, but it's functional right now.
Okay.
Any questions?
There was just one item.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. It was 26,000 for the main doors in the front of the school.
Okay, and then this district thing, what's that?
I can answer that one, Michael. When we receive the security grant from the state of Connecticut, there's a cost share. So you have to, for us to get, I'll make the numbers up, although Bernice, do you happen to know the number?
It's like a 75-25%.
Right.
So the grant is probably 180,000.
Yep. So you have to, there has to be the board has to have some skin in the game and pay a small percentage of the grant. For
The front doors on high school, are we getting any rebate from the company that originally installed them because the hinges were not up to code?
I don't know about that part of it, but I know that the doors met the new ballistic weight of them. But when I looked at how it was designed, it's kind of, I use the term Lego blocked. They Lego blocked all these pieces together, but they only put 4 supports in that whole wall. My suggestion was to take those 4 supports and increase them at every point where the pieces come together, so there'll be over 26 to 28 reinforced sections. So that in turn will make the wall stronger, and that will in turn make the doors will open easier.
Because I know we've had problems with those almost right along.
Right, 'cause if you look at it, it's just, it's not one contiguous piece of metal or material. It's just blocks put together.
There's no main supports.
There's no main supports.
So, but did anybody,
there isn't any code violations. I think it was just a bad design. The hinges are supposed to be strong enough. Everything is supposed to work. We still have that. We have one door today that, because the weight shifts on those supports, it doesn't close. So we have it closed, locked, and I saw it today, temporarily, out of order.
but the design, basically the design was, yeah. So I would try to contact the company anyways, just for.
And the company that installed said we did it by specs. So then we have had a few rounds with Castle Booze.
Yeah.
So we have not been all that successful. Mhm.
Any other questions?
Thank you. That then brings us into the 2021-2022 end of year finance report and line item transfers.
Bernice, can you step to the podium and give save some our end of the year processes here.
Okay. Okay, so we ended the year in a break-even position. And right now, in accordance with BOE policy 3010, we're recommending the following line item transfers. So we ended the year with a favorable variance in salaries, $312,697. It's primarily due to a few things. We had a mid-year resignation of a City Hill Middle School assistant principal. So we have that. We reworked the athletic director position. And we adjusted the 22-23 budget for that, but we still had that position in the 21-22 budget. And then we had a later than anticipated start date of our facilities director, Mr. Bernardi. And so that led us to a favorable variance of $312,000. Employee benefits, we ended the year with a favorable variance of $255,000. That is primarily from a reduced required contribution of pension expense from the borough, reduced workers' compensation expense, and reduced OPEB expense share with the borough. We ended with purchase services in an unfavorable variance of $243,431,000, primarily because of tuition expenses, partially because of special education, but also partially because we had 22 students enrolled in ACEs at Chase. That was a new program, a new school, and we ended the year with an unfavorable variance of supplies at $317,610. That was from a combination. It's primarily due to cover the increased utility costs. Now electricity has gone up, everyone knows that, but we had the CHP equipment in the high school. We actually forecasted that we would have a reduction in costs this year. We have a municipal lease to pay for the equipment. And that was the extra cost was going to be offset by additional reduction in expenses. We had to start paying the lease this year because of the way the deal was structured. However, because of supply problems, the parts didn't come to install and to get the equipment up and running. So we had to pay for the lease for 8.5 months before the parts came here. So it wasn't operational till middle of March. So we had that extra cost, and then we had no favorable variance. So that led to an unfavorable variance in supplies. And then capital was almost a break even. We had an unfavorable variance of $675. And then I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that our year-to-date payments were adjusted by a borough contribution of $1.2 million to bring our healthcare costs to a break-even point. The board may remember that the borough in the budget process said that they would contribute $1.8 million to our healthcare costs. We did not require $1.8 million to come to a break-even point in that line because of our census. Our census was reduced, so our costs were a little reduced. So we didn't need the $1.8 million.
So in theory, Bernice, they gave us 700,000 less than anticipated, which is very much like us returning back 700,000.
Exactly. So at this time, we ask for approval for the line item transfers.
Thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the line item transfers as recommended by the superintendent? We have a motion by Ms. Grant. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
second by Mr. Scully. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And any abstentions? That motion passes. That brings us to approval of architects for window replacement.
We are pursuing the replacement of windows in several of our buildings. We went out to bid for architects for the project. You will find a memo from either Bernice or Michael. Bernice, with the bids that were awarded and the recommendation to award to Silver Petroselli. Based on the fact that the two bids that were lower than Silver Petroselli did not meet all of our requirements. Mr. Bernardi is here. He can speak to those. I cannot if you have questions in regards to that.
Okay. So then could I have a motion to award the contract for architects for window replacement at Hopbrook, Salem, and Hillside Schools to Silver Petroselli and Associates in the amount of $165,000?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion by Ms. Makowski. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second by Ms. Grant. Any discussion?
I have one question. Do we have a performance bond with Silver Petroselli? There's no performance bond.
Mr. Scully, do you do the performance bond with the architects or you do it with
Anybody that can mess up a job.
So I know you want to do it with the folks that are doing the windows.
Right,
So we'll make sure that that gets into the request.
yeah, because, this company's blaming the front windows on architects. They went by specs.
Yes.
If you had performance bonds and when this originally came up, you could have pulled the bonds and it wouldn't have cost us any money.
We didn't pull performance bonds with the renovation project, or we did on some things, or I don't recall.
I'm not sure exactly
Okay.
what, because it was a big project.
Yeah, I know.
And, but, it's unfortunate you have to cover your backsides.
Mhm.
So if Silver Petroselli comes in and tells us, yeah, these windows are gonna work and this and that, and it's all laid out, and then comes to find out they're not engineered right, who do you go after?
Mhm.
Or you pay it yourself.
Mhm.
And we've been doing a lot of that.
Mhm.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And any abstentions? That motion passes. That then brings us to the approval of the minutes. Could I have a motion to approve minutes of the August 11th, 2022 regular meeting of the Board of Education? We have a motion by Ms. O'Donnell. Do we have a second? And a second by Mr. Scully. All those in favor? Any opposed? Could I then have a motion to approve minutes of the August 24th, 2022 Special Board of Education meeting? We have a motion by Ms. O'Donnell. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
And a second by Mr. Scully. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And any abstentions? That motion passes. That brings us to communications. And our first communication is Keep Being Awesome, the Naugatuck Youth Services event, which will be held on October 12th of this year. And the link to sign up and purchase a ticket is in board docs. And then this brings us to Pest Control Bid Award.
It's really just for communication purposes. We partnered with the borough for pest control and saved some money. So they voted on it. We partnered with them. And there's about 3,300 a year in savings. Thank you, Bernice.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other communications?
I can, the Naugatuck Youth Services received a grant, $600,000, to help with the drug-free communities and their program. I always forget the name of it.
Step up, Noggy.
Thank you. That's it. Step Up Noggy. So this, and they've been working with the schools and with school children to prevent misuse of drugs. So this grant is going to help a lot. It's going to be a big boost for the program. And the good thing is that they do interact with the students. The students enjoy being down there, and they have parents that are involved in the program. So this is really quite a feather in our cap here. So congratulations to the youth services.
Good. Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone have any other communications? Seeing none, that brings us to adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
We have a motion by Ms. O'Donnell. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second by Ms. Makowski. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
He loves doing that.